Now imagine you have some service within Salesforce that you want to expose. Like say for example, this thing changes. Okay, now the external system needs some data, needs some account name or account to be created or any subject to be in Salesforce from external. So what happens is this direction will change. So here what you will have is you will basically have an Apex class which creates, like you are created for your custom control, which creates an account. This Apex class now you will expose to the third party as a web service call, either as a SOAP or REST API. So basically an Apex class from Salesforce will be called into the third party and they will make a call. This is the other way around. Okay, so this call will go from here to here and they will be able to consume your Apex class. They'll be able to pass the parameters and get the results back. Okay, so this call is coming in from the external system, needs an account to be created or something. Now this will come from external system into Salesforce. Okay, so what you'll basically do is you'll convert your Apex class into a web service. So let's see how we do that. So there are two fundamental APIs. Either you use the SOAP API or you use the REST API. So API basically, SOAP is protocol neutral. It is accessible via these protocols: HTTP, SMTP, TCP. But the only thing is it accepts only XML and it requires a web service definition file. So that's the additional part in it. REST is the restricted to HTTP protocol but can use JSON, XML, Atom, and this is the one which the industry is majority betting on and is used heavily even on my projects or all the projects that I have worked. REST is gaining popularity. Okay. So a use case for REST, it's there everywhere from a single page app. It is services provided by REST API or the norm. Okay. There are also technical benefits. It's very easy. It's a great choice for startups, developers, all your React.js, all your other Ola, Swiggy, Uber, you see, they use REST API. Okay. Now, if it is SOAP is better suited for enterprise, but it can also be used for smaller endeavors. But the main challenge here is development in SOAP will take longer time. So instead of that, if you want, there is no specific reason which stops you, and you want to keep the code simpler and development faster, you can go for REST development. Now let's look at a REST API. What is all this? Let's first look at a REST API. Now in this, what we are going to do is we are going to basically create an account and basically we are going to get the value from it. So what happens here is first you say this is an Apex class. You create an Apex class. You say @REST resource. You do the URL mapping. REST, everything is through mapping. Okay, we look at a REST example. @REST resource URL mapping account/stack. Now this is the external endpoint that your users will use. Okay, so third-party users will use. So what you do here is basically you create a class global with sharing and then you create the methods. And you do annotate the HTTP delete. These are HTTP REST annotations. Okay, what does this method do? It's an HTTP get. So if the third party wants to call an HTTP get of account, he's going to call this one. So here what we are doing here is basically this method is returning an account. And there are some methods: REST request and response, as we saw this. Now this will pack up the external call to this URL and present us with the parameters. Like say REST request is for the request parameters, REST response is to send the parameters. So in the request, if the person sends us the ID, what we will do is we'll return the account back to him. So we're going to go through REST request.request URI. Request URI means the URL value which is coming and substring. So we're going to say last index of slash. So we'll say account slash. If anybody says account slash and the ID, we will return the value to that. Please note that this is the URL mapping, is the base URL that the person will connect. We'll look at the full example, then it will become clearer to understand. And also what will happen is this account is going to say select ID, name, website from account, where ID is equal to :account. So this is basically what is happening is this variable. Okay, this got a little cut off here. This is basically :account ID, which is this variable which is coming in the URL. Okay, so first let's implement this to understand. This HTTP post is directly taking 3 parameters and creating the value over here. The parameters will have to come in as JSON. So we will do both of this. We'll do a get REST API, expose it via workbench, and HTTP post. I will try to show you via the workbench, which is kind of a simulation of a third party, but the full code to expose via Java, I will share it with it is shared in the documentation part. Okay, if there's an example as to how the third party will call. Now in the workbench, how do you actually invoke this? Okay, now suppose you want to create a record. What you will do is you say services apex rest, the full URL, production URL in your case, which you are exposing, services apex rest devlite 1973. You can ignore that. Get case or the URL name, that is do get. So what you're going to do here is, in our case, sorry, I just went ahead here. So in our case, what we will do is we'll have to pass this. This is actually to get the case or something. So this gives you you'll have to pass the parameters this way. Typically, you will call the services apex rest and your class name, that is your account, your URL mapping name, and pass the parameter. Okay, and then you decide do get or do post. So let us see all of this, how this works. Okay, if you remember this here, we were giving the URL and then the post, right? When we do the post here in our URL from external system, this will fire. If you do a get, this will fire, because HTTP get and HTTP post annotated are there. Okay, these are the basic HTTP annotations, and added to this you have HTTP patch, which is like an update again. Okay, and an HTTP port also. Alright, so let's implement an HTTP REST here. So say HTTP REST account creation. This is the class name. REST account service. Let's create a common service for accounts and call it REST account service. Now this we are going to expose. Okay, so the first thing, if you see here, we need to first make it global and at the rate REST resource. We say at the rate REST resource and URL mapping we need to give equal to slash, we just give ACC and star. So this is the annotation. So people have to come over here to connect it. Okay, and this changes to global. Okay, with these two lines we have created our first resource. First resource URL M has to be capital. And please don't forget to give the with sharing, because the sharing rules have to be implemented. Now at the rate HTTP get. Let's take the HTTP get here and let's call it global static. All methods have to be static and global. Okay, global static, and we are returning an entire account object. So the other party will get an entire account object. Okay, do get. Now REST context. REST request and REST response. REST request. So initialize these two objects. Basically, we will not be using the REST response, but we will just, for understanding sake, we will just keep it on. Okay, REST context dot response. Now first is we need to create a account ID variable, which is going to get us the it's not request. So when you type it, the request URI automatically comes up. This is the value of it. Dot substring flex off, because people are going to pass it like slash id, right? We're going to take the first slash, this one. So we want to substring it. We will get the entire substring of that, because we don't want the slash, we want only the id. So that id should only be stored, because when a value comes in like this 004 xui, we don't want the slash, we only want the zeros data. Okay, so that once we catch this, now we can say account cc account ID, this one which we passed. Now we can do error handling and say, but right now we're not going to do the error handling. We can do a further try catch and then pass the value and all that. That is something that we are assuming that the account ID is there. That now you know, like in the, you've seen it in the extension and standard control, the same logic. You'll have to change the data type here and do the try catch exception, put the same kind of logic and return. Please refer to the standard extension controller and custom controller logic. So you don't use any Apex messages here, you'll just return the string, change the data type to this. Okay, so now we need to return this value. Okay, so with this should be good. Let's save this. See, that's the problem. There are no issues here. So now how do we test this? So we have a REST resource, URL mapping, global with sharing, all that is set up. So what we have to do here is we have to go to a place to simulate this. We have to go to a place called workbench.developerforce.com. Please go to workbench.developerforce.com. Now here select production version 45. Please select this. We are going to test this external. See, there is no point calling it from anonymous block. Okay, that's not the way. We are now going to act as if it's a third party. Now typically one more thing that is important, please understand, when third parties connect, Salesforce has to provide the following credentials to them: username, password, security token, and then you have to create a connected app. The connected app will contain a client ID and client secret. Okay, when the third party passes all these parameters, then they will get a session ID. They will get a session ID if all parameters are fine. This is called two-factor authentication. I'll give you the code to how to implement that. Username, password, security token is over here. What you do is, in your user, under your personal settings, you can reset your security token. In the settings, reset your security token, you will get a new token. Okay, let's say reset my security token. If you reset this, you will get a token in the email. That is what I'm talking about here. This is the token. Username, password plus security token as one word. And then you'll have to create a connected app. So that we will see in the app manager. Sorry. Since we have the personal settings, we have come out of the other menu. So once you reset that security token, you have to come back here, and in the app manager, what you do is you say new connected app and say test. You have to give your email and enable this OAuth settings. This can be anything. Now what are we doing here? See, we are creating a connected app, and then you have to decide what is the kind of access that that connected app is going to give. Once you do this, you save it. You give full access over here if you want, or access only the particular data. Then we save it. Once we create this connected app, what happens is it will give you a client ID and security key. See, click to reveal. So this is the consumer key, which is I'm talking about client ID and consumer secret. So this all these two are what I'm talking about, consumer key. So with all these parameters, username, password, security token, consumer key, client secret, these parameters you have to give to the third party. They will use it in the authentication. They'll pass it as the headers. These parameters will be passed. These params will be passed as headers, as HTTP headers. Okay, and they will get a session if it is done. Then they will call your URL. Or your HTTP. Okay, so now let us see. Now when we do this, then they'll call you URL. Now let us see this. So when we use this workbench, what happens is it is already like imagining like your connected app is connected to your log org, and this is an external user who's trying to connect. So now let's go ahead and test this. So that was about how to create a connected app. So please be aware of that. You have to create user, password, security token generated, create a connected app, consumer key, client ID, all these parameters you need to pass to the third party. They will take care. I'll also share the sample code as to how you have to do this, how you use this. Now come back here and click on the REST Explorer in the workbench. So as I told you, now this is how you call it, Apex REST, and you give your ECC name and then the ID. So what are we doing here? The third party is trying to get the account detail, right? So type account here. Select any account, take the ID, and now we can pass it into the workbench. And you have to select get. Okay, we are doing get. If you do post, you have to pass the data to that. First, let's do this. Click on execute. It's telling no rows for us. Let us see what is the problem. Let's make that global. Static. Let's see what's happening here again. So if we get an error like this, what we need to do is we need to first check what parameters are being correctly passed. So we can use our system.debug to see what is the account ID that is coming in. Alright, so let's see what's the account ID that is getting passed over here. So let's look at what's the account ID that's getting passed here. So the account ID that is getting passed here. Let's save this. Let's run this again. So when that hits the workbench, it's going to call. So how do you call it? Service REST, Apex REST is your URL, and then ACC is your class name. ACC is your URL mapping name, sorry, and then you say / the value. Okay, so now let's see the logs. Given an error here. So it's actually passing this, but okay. We got it. See what's happening here is if you see here, it's taking the slash, so we need to remove that part already. So first let's look at this substring syntax. I think it needs an a start and an end. So this is going to be that. So let us add this length, and what we'll do is let's again run this. Let's see what the logs show up. No, it's still showing the same value, so we need to make a change on this. Yeah, so I had to see the last index because there are multiple slashes, right? In that field, that is my mistake. So now it should work. So what was happening was it was taking the second, the first slash occurrence, which is before ECC. I want to check the last index. So now when I go here and when I go to my workbench and execute it, it's going to return me my account object. So now if you see here, it's worked fine. It's got the account ID back, account name back. The reason was what was happening here is at the last index, because now the URL is correct. Now if you see the URL, I will have only the ID. Otherwise it was giving the login.salesforce.com/acc/ right. So if you see here, guys, please understand this part. This is only the partial URL. The full URL is coming, right? So when we access it, so that's what. So this is how we do it. Call a external URL and get the data. Now this data has been passed. Now if you show the see the raw response, this is how it will be passed. Okay. So if you click on show raw response, it will show you what is actually passed. So let's keep going on now. So the next one that we're going to do is a post method. Okay. So let's write a post method to create account. So now let's go here and say open. Let's take this syntax here. Let's not mix it up, and this has to be a post. So do post. Please note there is always a question like, can I have multiple HTTP method? Yes, but then the number of parameters that you pass will differentiate it. You can have multiple annotations in a class file, yes, but the number of parameters has to be different. Okay. So now what happens is this is going to take a string name string rating. This is the required fields again now in account. So if you create a new account, name is required. Active is equal to, I think that's the only one which is required. SLA, I think it's just required in the UI. So let's complete the same things. Let's do the string active. Use lowercase, and then one more thing is, I think these are the ones which are required according to me. If there is anything else, let's come back. So we say account ACC equal to, okay, we'll use the global account which is created. We're going to say ACC dot name equal to the name that's getting passed here, and we are going to say ACC dot rating is equal to the active value which is getting passed here, two strings. So we got to insert the active ACC and return. So what we can do is we'll, instead of account, we'll just return string. Return acc.id. Now again here, what I want to tell you is if you find any catch exceptions, you will have so now again you need to do the try catch and every controller shift tab if you want to actually do the full-fledged so that part, that way you'll have to, the third party will look at the string. Right now what we are doing is if we create an account acc equal to new, and we're going to insert that one. So this is going to be a do post and this data. Now let's see how to call this. Okay, now it HTTP post, so I go back to my workbench. Now the URL is the same. Okay, the URL won't change, only the annotation. See HTTP post. Now this changes, and now here I need to give it in double quotes. I say exactly the same parameters that you have specified in your class. Okay, name and active. So you're going to create a string name and active, double quotes colon, rest account. I'll say rest account 100, comma, active colon, again a JavaScript string. Yes. Okay. So now I have entered this. Let's execute this. So now if you see here, it has created the record. Let's show response here. Okay. So now let's copy this and see. Copy this again. So now what happens here is basically this account has got created. So if you go to the account tab, so we had created a do post. Remember, in the do post we did ask for parameters. See, the rest account 100 has got created over here, and it has kicked off all the workflows, all the process builder, everything behind it. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about. So how we invoked it was, we did a do post. We just changed the post. If we do get, then it has to get the details. See what happens now. Now this record exists. Now execute this. Now it's going to give us the idea name and author. Okay, see. So we don't call the method name. We call it by the HTTP annotation. So we have a post put also similar, almost similar to this. Okay. Then patch is a kind of an update. Delete if you want to delete a record. Head is if you want to get the header details of that. You will use get and post mostly, and also delete. Now if you want to try the patch, what you can do is you can try it for a update statement. Okay. Right now, please complete this get and post, which is critical to understand for the integration point of view. So let's understand what we did here. We created @REST resource, URL mapping, ACC star, global with sharing class, and then we gave an annotated method. First, we did a do get. So using a request, we get the value, and then we give the response. Okay. And in the HTTP post, we accept parameters in the method, and then we create a record and return the value. In the workbench, we called both using the annotation. Now let's see how, and we also saw like a short, we also wanted to see like, we user password token, connected app, how to create a consumer key. All these parameters have to be passed. Now let us look at an actual code sample of a third party. We did workbench, right? So let's look at, this is a Java code here. Just let me show you this. So this is the Java code here. So basically this is going to give you a security token here. Okay. This code is shared with you. So you have to create a complete kind of a string over here. And once you do this, it is going to get passed. So this code sample you can see over here. So the HTTP get, first it gets a session. Once it passes all the parameters here, username, client secret that I have specified, and then when you get a session, what you do is you pass this login instance URL plus the services same way. Now this is for a get case, whereas in our place it was for a create of an account. So a bit of a different URL. Then you can do your normal processing in your external system. You can take a look at this code which is exposed to you in your in the attachments. Okay. And you can use it the way you want it, either in .NET, Java, or any system that you want. I'm talking about this one, okay? Example Java REST API. But you need to have all these dependencies that you see here to connect to this.